Dispatch, this is Jody.
Yes, ma'am. I need to report my neighbor has been beat up. He's got some pretty significant bruises and things to his face.
Okay, your neighbor was beaten up at some point?
Yes, ma'am.
What is your name?
My name is Tabitha.
What's your neighbor's name?
Edward Vaughn.
There's a young man that he says done it. You just stay right there.
Are you still there? Tabitha?
A 911 call came in from Miss Tabitha Smith, who reported that her 91-year-old neighbor, Mr. Edward Vaughn, had been assaulted.
They dispatched a deputy to the scene. The deputy made contact with Tabitha Smith, who was also in the presence of Edward Vaughn. Edward Vaughn had lacerations to his face, bruising, swelling. He had blood coming out of his ears. Mr. Vaughn at that time was very lucid and of a clear mind and was able to easily recall what happened. Mr. Vaughn told the primary responding deputy that he actually made contact with two men earlier and that these individuals were interested in buying a vehicle that Mr. Vaughn had for sale. He said these individuals took Mr. Vaughn and basically abducted him, held him against his will, and put a blanket or some type of a carpet over him and drove him out in the county where they physically assaulted him.
He said they did zip tie his hands together and assaulted him, punched him, hit him in the head 2 or 3 times, and ultimately they had brought him back home.
At this point, Mr. Vaughn, being 91 years old, needed intense medical attention.
Ultimately, he was loaded up in the ambulance and go to the hospital.
The first time I met Edward Vaughn was with Mission Machine, a nonprofit, and I was just a volunteer driver at that time. Mission Machine's mission is to help homeless with a temporary place to stay, and he was just needing a place until he could get into an apartment. The happiest memory I've got of Mr. Vaughn is when he got his apartment here. He was just very happy about where he was at, and very proud of what he had.
Mr. Vaughn didn't have a whole lot of money. He didn't have much for himself, but he had a very charitable soul to him. He would have helped just about anybody, I believe.
Mr. Vaughn was a World War II vet. He had got a Bronze Star. He was very proud of the fact that he had served his country.
He served me. He fought for me, my freedom, for all of us.
Everything that he had done in his life through war, through the many years after, he had always been a survivor. He knew what he needed to do, and he knew how to survive.
Miss Smith said that she noticed when she left that morning at about 6:30 that Mr. Vaughn's car was gone. When Miss Smith came back about 8, the car was back and Mr. Vaughn was inside the car.
That's when she saw Mr. Edward Vaughn in the presence of Mr. Jake Miller.
I knew Jake because I had seen him around the apartment complex before. He had a friend that stayed in the apartment complex, but never seen him around Mr. Vaughn ever. He was so out of place. Jake seemed agitated. He was very aggressive, mad almost. I guess you could say, it just felt wrong. I approached Mr. Vaughn. The left side of his face was so swollen. It was horrifying. I asked him what the heck happened to his face, and he whispers to me to call 911. That's when I took him inside his apartment. I'd unlocked the door behind us. I grabbed the phone and I dialed 911.
At some point prior to the arrival of law enforcement, Jake Miller left.
One of those neighbors said that she was actually awake between 4:30 and 6 a.m. and heard who she knew to be Tommy Trosper at Mr. Vaughn's residence. We were also able to verify through another neighbor that Tommy Trosper was at Mr. Vaughn's house on the morning of the 911 call.
Jake and Tommy were very well known to us, mainly in property crimes, some assaults. Key thing here is that Tommy Trosper and Jake Miller were thick as thieves, so to speak. They were friends. They were always around each other. So the fact that Tommy and Jake were identified being together, it really streamlined the investigation because now law enforcement had suspects. Once it was identified that Tommy Trosper and Jake Miller were actually the suspects that we were looking for, it was extremely important to find them.
We initially notified surrounding law enforcement agencies. We issued a BOLO for Tommy Trosper and Jake Miller. We exhausted no resources in that attempt to locate them. They did tell us that Mr. Vaughn's health was deteriorating and that if we wanted to speak to him, that we needed to speak with him fairly quickly.
The purpose of speaking with Edward Vaughn was to obtain what law enforcement calls a dying declaration. To obtain an official identification of the suspect was extremely crucial in this investigation.
Based on Mr. Vaughn's injuries, it was very difficult for him to speak. So we actually sent Detective Manus photos of Tommy Trosper and Jake Miller to confirm the identity of the suspects.
I remember walking into the ICU unit, and when I looked at Edward Vaughn, I was absolutely speechless. I've been doing this job for 30 years. I have seen evil in just about every way you can imagine. I've seen crimes that would keep you awake at night. When I seen what this man looked like and the extent of his injuries, it absolutely stunned me to the point where I had to gather my composure. And I recall that his eyes looked at me. He had the most sincere eyes. He had the most comforting. I told him what I was there for. I said, I want you to be able to identify these people. I said, do you know them? I said, if you know who these people are, can you blink your eyes for me? And he blinked his eyes. I said, Mr. Vaughn, I said, are these the people that hurt you? And he just blinked his eyes. I said, if you're 100%, I want you to blink twice for me. And I no sooner said that than he blinked twice. And that was a solid identification. I remember his eyes. I'll never forget them.
The police department pursued the vehicle. After a short pursuit, they're actually able to take the driver into custody. Tommy Trosper was then arrested for being in possession of a stolen vehicle and was then taken to the White County Sheriff's Department where he was processed and booked on those charges.
Our detectives went and pulled him from there before he was even dressed out on his charges. It was going to be tough to get a true confession out of Tommy. He was no stranger to this type of criminal procedure, but we had to try to get him to talk.
You want some coffee to kind of relax you a little bit?
I actually seen the face of Edward Vaughn, and I was looking at the person who made Edward Vaughn look like he looked, who beat that man to that condition. The suspect's confession is exactly what I wanted.
A 91-year-old man is fighting for his life after police say he was kidnapped from his Judsonia home Monday morning.
We were all very much shocked. We never thought that something like that could happen in our neighborhood, much less to a man as kind as Mr. Vaughn.
We knew from past encounters that Tommy Trosper had with law enforcement that we needed to cut straight to the chase. Building a rapport with Tommy Trosper, it was useless.
Okay. Tell me about Edward Vaughn.
I don't know what
You was there, Tommy. We got witnesses, we got statements. Don't jack me around. Just tell me what happened, bro.
what it was is about a week and a half or so ago. And I was gonna buy that truck that he's got for real, like, and I asked him about it, and I looked at the truck. You know, he said he bought it for, I think he said $600 or something. And the old man said, "Well, I give it to you for what I paid for it." I said, "Well, I can't do that, you know." I said, "Well, look, man, look, this is all I got," and it was like 200 and some loose bills.
Okay.
And then a week ago, we took him. We went and ate Chinese food. Well, on the way back, he reached out and said, "I better than anybody's ever anymore." And I was like, "Whoa, what?" You know, and I kind of freaked out.
About Ed Vaughn?
Yeah, and I kind of freaked out, and I was like, "Whoa, man, don't ever talk to me like that again." And then after that, it seemed like every day he would, "Come on, man, just let me see it, show it to me." And nobody believed me. So I stood there one day and just held my phone and recorded while he was talking to me. And I played the video back, and I said, "Man," I was like, "I could show this to somebody and you probably get in trouble for it, I don't know."
In the state of Arkansas, one adult propositioning another adult for sex is not illegal whatsoever. Knowing Tommy Trosper, that immediately brought my interest because he's starting to pad his involvement. He's starting to make it a little bit easier for the world to understand why he did what he did.
I'm just gonna bribe Bill and like, "Hey, like, if you let me give you what I got, I won't turn this into the police."
So you were going to bribe him?
I mean, kind of, but
For what reason?
because I was gonna pay $600 for
The vehicle?
truck, you
See if
know,
it can go down to a lower price or something?
I don't think that video bothered Tommy in any way at all other than the fact it gave him the motive that he need to later blackmail Edward Vaughn.
Okay. You told me things got out of hand yesterday, so what happened yesterday?
Me and Jake, we picked him up.
Picked him up at his house, right?
Yeah.
Okay, where'd you take him?
To Chris's house.
Chris who's? Chris Torres?
Yeah.
So you and Jake went to Chris's house at Red River Shores.
Yeah.
I knew that Chris Torres and Tommy Trosper were probably acquaintances, to say the least.
Chris Torres did have a building next to his house out there that they did work on cars. Maybe Tommy thought he could take that car out there and Chris could look at it and see if it was worth buying.
Where did the old man get hit at?
Where you get hit?
Yeah. At his house or Red River Shores?
At the shores. Yeah, but it was
Who hit him?
Jake.
Jake hit him? You didn't hit him?
I wouldn't hit that old ass man. Jake started smacking him up like, you're gonna do this and that and this, and I was like, "Man, no, don't, you know, what do you?" I pushed Jake, you know what I'm saying? Jake, don't, no, dude, don't hit him, he's old. And then I was like, "Whatever, dude, I'm not in it," and I just walked off.
So you walk off. Did Jake tie his hands with zip ties? Jake did? When did his hands get tied?
Right before he took him home. I don't know why.
So Jake tied his hands at Red River Shores, that's what you're telling me. And then hit him. And then took him home? Made no damn sense.
I mean, It's, I mean, yeah. I mean, yeah, not really, kind of, not really, though. And, like, I mean, yeah.
Tommy is incoherent. He's stuttering. A truthful person just simply needs to recount an event where a liar needs to create it.
One question.
Yes.
Why didn't you call the police after it all happened? If you had nothing to do with it, why didn't you call the police?
I mean, I don't know.
You just got through saying you had nothing to do with it, so why didn't you call the police?
I'm scared, man. I'm a drug addict, man. I can't help it. I need help, man.
That has got nothing to do with you picking up your phone, calling 911 anonymously, and saying, here's what I did. Give me one good reason why you didn't do it, and I'll believe you. One reason. You just got there saying multiple times that you weren't going to be involved in hitting him because he's an old man. Because you have a conscience about that. You're not going to hurt an old man. But yet you see an old man get beaten. You see an old man get tied up. You see an old man get hurt, and you did nothing about it, nor did you call the police. Am I getting all of that about bundled up right? You claimed you were going to tell the police about it, but that's not really what
I was trying.
That's not really what you were going to do, because you also admitted your words were you were going to use it to bribe him to lower the price of the drug. But that was your words. That's what you said. That's what you said.
You had this video. This was your idea. You took it, and you did so with a purpose. It just showed that Tommy was the mastermind behind this whole thing.
My next step, I wanted to 100% identify him as the actual ringleader behind this. Sometime turning up the heat will let you know exactly where you are in the interview.
I'm going to tell you what I think. This is just mind working. I think it's all your idea. Why don't we see if we can make this truck payment go down just a little bit? I think you were the ringleader. You were the mastermind. You said that you videoed him with the intention to bribe him. You just admitted it. You let me talk now. You never walked off. It's been your plan to the beginning. It was your plan to get him to lower the price on that truck, and when he wouldn't lower the price on that truck, it went too far. Is that it?
Then y'all gonna tie him up, scared of
Got him, get him low price on that truck.
No.
Was the man afraid? No. The man was not afraid getting hit and
Tie him up.
and
I mean, that look came from his face, he wasn't scared.
I'm sure you got fear. I'm scared to death right now.
Oh, you should be.
I started hitting him to get him to lower the price on that truck.
No.
What do you think he told us?
The old man was fine.
He's not fine. He's in ICU at St. Vincent, Little Rock. Hey, not mate. That's how serious this is, bud. You know what I can see? Maybe the video didn't work. Maybe like, the video didn't work. So I know, we'll amp it up a little bit. So I'll tie him up, put something over his head, make him think we're gonna hurt him. Maybe that get him to lower the price on that truck, right?
No, Jake just smacked him, like out of nowhere.
You standing right there when you got tied up, yes or no?
I was
Right
in the
there.
yard somewhere.
Right there with him.
I was somewhere in the
He
yard.
was right there with him, talking to you, having a conversation with him.
I know, I was somewhere in the
You're having a
yard.
conversation with him.
I understand that, dude.
I know. Don't you holler at me, brother.
Man,
Don't you holler at me.
You keep cutting me off.
No, because you won't tell me the
So you're asking me where the was
Exactly. Where were you?
when he
Where were you at? Put that in the letter. Where were you at?
walked up over to him. You know what I'm saying? They're sitting, the old man's sitting in the car. I walked up right there.
So after hours of speaking with Tommy Trosper, he still was lying. He would talk to us enough to verify his involvement. However, he wouldn't give us the details of his involvement.
If he said nothing else, we present him to the jury as a liar, and that is amazing advantages for the prosecution.
How many lies you told me?
I'm not lying to you. Seriously, I mean, I can't. I mean, I'm not. I know the.
You know what? What you know?
No, man. I feel.
The most important things that we were able to get from an interview with Tommy was Tommy's admission that him and Jake Miller at one point in time were in the presence of Edward Vaughn. Had taken Edward Vaughn to someplace out in the county, which is identified as Chris Torres' house, that him and Jake Miller were present when Edward Vaughn was bound against his will, that they were present when Edward Vaughn was assaulted. So basically it was a confession, but just in piecemeal.
Trosper, you got anything else to say, man? Huh? No? Right now, you're under arrest for kidnapping, battery 2. Your bond's been set $250,000. So I need you to go ahead and stand up. We'll walk you to the back and get all the paper process.
Well, I think I'm against this wheel.
We had Tommy in jail, and now the next step is absolutely find Jake.
Chris Torres told law enforcement that on April the 9th of 2017 that Tommy Trosper, whom he knew, and Jake Miller, whom he knew, came to his residence in Judsonia with Edward Vaughn, and that Tommy Trosper showed Chris Torres a video that he had.
At one point, Tommy asked Chris did he want to help in quote-unquote roughing Edward Vaughn up, and Chris Torres told him no.
According to Chris, that was when he saw Edward Vaughn actually bound with zip ties.
Chris said he becomes upset and he's ordered him, you got to get out of here, get off my place. I'm not involved with this, and they leave. Another thing that Chris was willing to tell us was that Jake's hiding out in an abandoned trailer, just a few trailers down from where he was living. So we left immediately from Chris Torres' house and drove down the road looking for the address. We surrounded that house and ultimately found Jake Miller and took him into custody.
Based off the evidence alone, we suspected that Jake Miller was just along for the ride or the co-conspirator. We believe that this was all Tommy's doings, that Tommy was the main puppet master behind this. Tommy Trosper was the one that wanted the vehicle. Tommy Trosper was the one that knew Chris Torres, and that's where they took Edward Vaughn. Tommy Trosper was the one that recorded the secret video.
We had Tommy's story. We had Tommy blaming Jake for a lot of stuff. So now we're going to try to see how truthful Jake might be and how different a story he was going to tell from what Tommy told.
We'll initial by each one of your yeses. Not saying you're going to talk to me, it's just saying I read them to you, you understood them, and signed right there.
Talk to you about
Edward Vaughn. What you know about it, bro?
we didn't do it.
You didn't do it?
No.
No, I got witness statements. I got Tommy Trosper locked up saying he did. Brother, I mean it, man. Sometimes it's just best to be honest.
He already knows why he's there, and he's automatically going to a denial. That strategy is just to make him feel like he's standing alone, like everybody else has blamed you. We know exactly what happened, so we're past you telling the lies and trying to protect your friends because they blamed it all on you.
You're going to have to remember a little bit. Oh, man. Tell us what happened. Tell us the whole truth. What are you scared of?
You're just worried about the consequences. Worried about your freedom, weren't you?
Yes. And look, I try so hard to do good.
Well, we're in a pretty bad spot, but we can get through it, Jay. But the best way to get through is to be honest about it. That's the best cards you can play right now. That's just me being honest with you. You want to start over and tell us what happened, buddy?
Started off when we first went over it. I didn't know what we was doing. Tommy told me just go with it. And he went and knocked on the door. The old man came out. And he showed him the video. And then that's when Tommy hit him. The old guy, he was like stunned. And then after that, we went to Chris's, and Chris told us to get the man out of there.
Well, I know you helped zip ties.
No, Tommy told me to blindfold him. That I said, man, I'm sorry,
Right.
but I was told to do this.
Okay. So Tommy tied him, zip tied his hands, you blindfolded him, then what?
We went right, and he was trying to find somewhere to put him.
Okay. Did Tommy talk about killing him?
He said he should.
He should kill him. Okay. Then what?
We rode, and at the end of it, it was morning time. Tommy dropped me and the old man off, and that's when I cut off the zip ties and was going back to the old guy's place.
So y'all go back, you take him back home, you cut the zip ties off of him, then y'all take him home.
And then Tommy left, and the older guy, I guess he went into someone's house, and I guess they asked about his face. And he told them.
How'd you leave?
My cousin came and got me.
Getting Jake to actually admit these little key pieces was absolutely critical in this investigation. Primarily because Jake began to confirm exactly what Edward Vaughn said earlier.
Tommy hit him. They said, be aggressive.
Probably wanted everybody to rough him up, didn't he?
How many times you hit him?
Just, I slapped him once.
You slapped him once.
I mean, I know that really, really looks bad on me, but I can't lie. I mean, I just wasn't thinking.
Chris ever hit you?
Not that I see.
So what are you sorry for exactly?
I'm sorry for even being there.
Wrong friends and drugs.
Not thinking.
I felt like he opened up and told us more of the truth. I think Jake Miller was scared. I think he was worried about the outcomes and the situation he had found himself in, where Tommy, I don't think, cared about any of that.
It's the two individuals pieced stories together that we was able to find a basic consistency that supported the allegation by Edward Vaughn.
But it was hopeful that Mr. Vaughn would pull through and be strong enough to testify in court against the two and actually be able to be the victim that stands up there and points at them and says, these are the men that attacked me and did this to me. We received a call from the hospital Mr. Vaughn was at that he had actually passed away from his injuries. And that changed everything for us.
It's always the cases like this that involve children or the elderly that can't defend themselves that you take most to heart as an investigator, you know. So, you know.
He was a very sweet man. It broke my heart that something of this tragic could happen to a person so kind.
The charges were amended from kidnapping and battery to actual capital murder and kidnapping.
Without having any type of forensic evidence, and now we have a victim that's not going to be there to testify in court. It was all on us. We were going to have to tell Mr. Vaughn's story and seek justice for him.
I felt it was extremely important to interview Tommy Trosper again to see if he had any remorse for what they did, and seeing if Tommy Trosper would admit it, and if he would admit it, if he would tell the truth.
All right, well, we're going to update you on it. What's your highest level of education?
So now we was wanting to see how far he would be willing to go speaking with us when we tell him that his charges are upgraded to the most heinous charge of a criminal act you can be charged with in this state.
What we want to let you know is that we've received a phone call today from St. Vincent's Infirmary indicating that Mr. Vaughn has died. Your charges will be upgraded to capital murder. Is there anything that you would like to say on your behalf?
What is he going to do? Is he going to actually admit this? Is he going to tell the truth to save himself? Or is he going to continue on with his lies and deflection?
I could imagine hearing that kind of news, especially if I knew that this man's death was because of something I did. But this gives you the opportunity to actually go into a little bit of detail, and perhaps other people that will be watching this video can hear how sorry you are for what you did. Are you sorry?
Terrible.
Now is really the time for truth. Now is not the time for lying. Okay? Your story hasn't changed. You say that you had absolutely no involvement in hitting him. Correct?
I didn't hit him.
Okay. So if anyone else comes forward and testifies that they've seen you hit him, they're lying.
I mean, yeah.
They aren't. Well, if they are, they aren't.
They are.
Does it surprise you that Jake's not telling the same story you're telling? Why would Jake not tell the same story you're telling? Jake's saying you both hit him, that he shares the same involvement as you did. Y'all both hit him. That's what Jake said. You're saying you didn't. And here's the problem I have with this. You were wanting to buy the vehicle. You made the video, yet you had nothing to do with assaulting him or binding him or nothing like that. What was Jake's purpose for doing this?
I don't know what was going through Jake's head.
Could it be because you're not telling the truth because you're afraid? Let's call a spade a spade.
I did not foresee Tommy Trosper being any more sympathetic to the plight of Edward Vaughn than what he was the first time around, even with being leveled with the accusation of a capital murder upgrade, but I was wanting to see.
Well, yeah, it does look pretty bad.
What do you mean?
You were driving. The man's laying in the back seat. You didn't hit him with a fist. You didn't hit him open hand and slap him.
I don't recall hitting him at all. I'm seriously telling the truth.
Do you realize the gravity of the situation that you're in?
I understand.
Okay, because it don't make sense. That's why you sitting here and saying that you didn't do it. 12 jurors is going to have a difficulty in believing that because I just laid out the factors that they would have a problem with.
I understand.
No, you don't understand
I really
because
do.
you know what you did. And why you will not admit to the truth is something that you're going to have to deal with on your own. I kind of sort of figure we could get it out now because here's what you need to understand. Mr. Vaughn was in a critical care unit in St. Vincent's for several days. He is now at the state crime lab with a medical autopsy being conducted. They're going to know exactly what happened. And when you stand before the court, ready? I didn't do it. That don't fare well. But what will fare well is that you tell the truth about what you did and explain your involvement. That's the only time we're going to get you to be able to do that.
I'm trying to. He was talking to me.
He is a 91-year-old man that was beat up, zip-tied, and held against his will. And you're now saying that the only person that did all of this was a scrawny little kid named Jake Miller? Are you seriously wanting us to believe that? That you had no involvement whatsoever, but yet you conceal your crime? You hide it. Mr. Vaughn didn't die immediately. Do you not understand that he was able to tell us who did what and what happened? Do you understand that? Are you sure there's nothing more you need to say? I'm putting this out here for your benefit. He didn't die immediately. He told us what happened. The reason why we didn't bring it to you when you were arrested is because we was wanting to see what you said. He is now dead. That changes the entire ballpark. Understand, he didn't die immediately. Once again, is there anything else you want to say from what you previously said according to your involvement, knowing that we spoke with him? Ami, now's the time. Mr. Vaughn said that in that vehicle you knocked the horse out of him. Period. You hit him. You hit him. Putting it out. That's what Mr. Vaughn says. Are you telling me that he is lying? You hit him in the face. He didn't die that day. He died just yesterday. We know what happened. We're giving you this opportunity to explain yourself.
That's what I did, though.
Okay, Tom.
And look, I mean, yeah, I had involvement in it. Yeah.
I know you had involvement.
Because, I was the reason we picked him up.
I know.
Even with presented with the possibility of being charged with murder, he maintained his specific denial.
I tried to tell you my story, man.
Now here's what you need to do, because Jake Miller just did it. It's your call. I'll just give you one last time to answer that question, then I won't bother you anymore.
I promise you I didn't hit him.
At this point in time, we cannot give you any other opportunity to explain yourself. Edward Vaughn is dead because of what Tommy Trosper and Jake Miller did to him. That's unequivocal. That is unprecedented truth. The only person whose story is different is you. Only person. Story's different. Is you. And are you sure that's what you want to go to court with? Being the only person who looks like a liar. Is that what you want to do?
I don't know what the hell happened, really.
I have already established he is a liar. So now the strategy was I wanted to show the jury exactly the type of person you're going to be seeing.
Okay. One more question, and then I'll just go on and leave this alone. It's not a question, it's a statement. It's a statement I want to hear from you. I want you to reach deep down in your soul. If I'm Mr. Vaughn and I'm sitting right here, or I'm Mr. Vaughn's family and I'm sitting right here, what would you say to them? Let them hear your soul. What would you say to them? Loss of words? Okay. We thank you for speaking with us. Your charges have been officially upgraded to kidnapping and capital murder. There is no bond set for you at this point. All right.
Even though we weren't able to get a full confession from Tommy Trosper, he put himself there, he put himself as a participant, he gave us the motive, which I believe was the only motive.
I felt we were extremely successful in the interview because Tommy Trosper did confirm the basics, but he also confirmed that he had absolutely no sympathy or any remorse for what he did.
Out of all the cases I've worked, I've never went to a victim's funeral. I just felt honored to be at that funeral.
So it's a very unique thing about the Veteran Cemetery in Arkansas because whenever you go into those grounds, it demands silence, it demands reverence. And I couldn't think of a better place for Edward Vaughn to rest.
Tommy Trosper pled guilty to murder in the first degree and kidnapping and was sentenced to 40 years in the Arkansas Department of Corrections. Later, Jake Miller pled guilty to murder in the first degree and kidnapping and was sentenced to 20 years in the Arkansas Department of Corrections. I'm happy with the investigation. I'm satisfied that we were able to get that conviction that we needed for this case and do what we could to get justice for Edward Vaughn.
Mr. Vaughn was pretty amazing, and it's great to be able to call a World War II veteran a friend.
I would like him to be remembered as a kind, gentle man. Thank you for serving our country. I'm very grateful to have gotten to be a part of Mr. Vaughn's life.
Edward Vaughn should be remembered as the person who he was, a hero, a true hero.
The city remembers the night before it remembers the name. Siren folding into the dark, rain slicking the sidewalks into mirror, a single apartment window still glowing at 3h17 du matin on the Lower East Side, and then nothing, no scream, no crash, just a silence so clean it felt staged. New York, 1978. A city addicted to noise learn how loud absence can be. By morning the headline would learn a new phrase, one that crawled under skin and stayed there, cold case. But that came late. First came the hallway. Narrow. Yellowed paint blistering like all scar. A door ajar by a finger is sweet. Inside, a room that felt paused mid-breeze, coffee cup half full, ashtray crowded, a radio tuned too static if someone had tried to erase a voice in a hurry. The window was open. The fire escape was wet. The city kept moving. They said she was meticulous. They said it was predictable. They said the neighborhood was loud enough to swallow anything. They said the timing was wrong, or too perfect, depending on who you asked. The building had seen worse night, the summer of the blackout still fresh in muscle memory, Luther sprinting like shadow, the city discovering what it could get away with when the lights went out. This night was quiet. That was the problem. The kind of quiet that doesn't ask permission. The kind that rewrite a life without leaving fingerprint. Her name would be printed wrong the first time. Then corrected. Then misspelled again. She worked late, kept odd hours, the sort of person the city reward and punish in equal measure. Et lived 3 blocks away, a routine etched into the pavement Sam Deli, Sam Corner, Sam no to the Sam man behind the counter. Predictable until it wasn't. When the police arrived, they found no blood, no struggle, no note. Just a calendar with a date circled in red and a word written twice, pressed hard enough to tear the paper, Tuesday. It wasn't a Tuesday. Neighbor offered fragment. A woman on the third floor thought she heard the footstep on the stair, fast, une veine, like someone counting them wrong. A cab driver remember a far with a suitcase too light to be useful and too heavy to be empty. A bartender swore she saw them together once, arguing without word, eyes locked, mood still. Everyone had a piece. None of it fee. The city does that. It on you puzzle piece from different box and are you to complain. By noon, the always smelt like wet wool and cheap coffee. Detective moved through it like ghosts pretending to be men, notebooks open, eyes trained on the details that don't want to be seen. The ashtray. The radio. The open window. The calendar. They asked about enemy. They asked about lovers. They asked about money. The answer were ordinary, which is how extraordinary seems. Someone mention a call the night before, wrong number, heavy breathing, a click. Someone else mention a letter that never arrived. Someone else mention nothing at all and said it with conviction. The first headline was Cosue. Missing woman in Lower East Side. The second was bolded. Bizarre disappearance stun block. By the third day, the word mystery slid into print like it belonged there. Reporter clustered at the stoop, camera angry, microphone thrust toward anyone who would talk. The building learned to keep its mouth shut. The city learned her face. A photograph pulled from a drawway, eyes bright, a smile that didn't know what was coming. The city love a face. It doesn't love answer. The investigation followed the usual groove. Phone record that led nowhere. Alibi that leaned on the same-red bar and the same-red lies. A show print on the fire escape washed time by rain and time. A scrap of fabric snagged on rust that matched nothing in evidence. They canvassed rooftop, basement, pawn shops. They checked hospital and jail. They waited for a body that didn't arrive. Weeks turned to month. Month turned to a field that grew heavy enough to bend a shelf. Then there was the tap. Not the kind you expect. Not a confession, not a threat. A cassette found in a drawer behind the radio, unlabeled, wound tight if someone had been afraid it might unravel on its own. On it, a voice counting. Slow at first. Then faster. Then louder, breathless, cut short by a sound that could have been a door or could have been the end of a sentence. The tap was logged, duplicated, misfilled, rediscovered, played until the oxide thinned and the voice softened into memory. Analysts argued about the accent. About the cadence. About whether the laughter was joy or panic. The tap didn't argue. It waited. The man block away became a person of interest because proximity is a language the police speak fluently. HIS routine cracked under scrutiny. A recept with the wrong time. A friend who remember the wrong night. A scratch on his on the said came from a cat that no one could find. Et denied no winner, then admitted a designer once, then insisted it meant nothing. The city watched him watch the camera and decided he looked guilty because guilt looked like something when you want it to. A lawyered up. The headline sharpened. Then dulled. Then moved on. Years passed the way they do in New York, fast and slow at the same time. The block changed. The deli changed on. The building got a new coat of paint that didn't take it cover the whole scar. The field got red dust. The word cold settled over it like frost, not dead, just preserved. Every so often, a detective would pull it down, flip through the photo, listen to the tap, and feel that familiar itch behind the eyes, the sense that something simple had been missed because it didn't announce itself as important. In 1984, a jogger found a suitcase in the river. It wasn't the right one. In 1989, a tip came in from out of state, a man bragging in a bar about a night in New York he couldn't remember straight. It went nowhere. In 1993, a letter arrived at the process, typed, unsigned, claiming the calendar had been a warning, not a reminder. The letter used the word Tuesday 3 times. The paper was cheap. The ink bled. The postmark was smeared. The letter was logged, debated, filed. What kept the case alive wasn't evidence. It was discomfort. The way the room had looked paused. The way the tap logged and stopped. The way the calendar insisted on a day that never came. The way the city seemed to flinch whenever the name was spoken. Cold case don't die, they hibernate, waiting for the weather to change. It changed quietly. Not with a body or a confession, but with a box found during a renovation 3 decades later, tucked above a drop ceiling in a building slated for condo. Inside, a ledger, brittle with age, page filled with neat column and cramped note. Date. Times. Address. A symbol repeated in the margin like a private language. The box was handed to a contractor, who handed it to a cop, who handed it to a detective who remembered the tap and the calendar and felt the each return, sharp now. The ledger didn't say her name. It didn't need to. It mapped the city like a nervous system, point lighting up in pattern that only make sense once you stop trying to force them into straight lines. Tuesday appeared again, not a date but a variable, a pivot. Cross-reference it with all transit strike, power outage, union meeting, and suddenly the key night wasn't key at all, it was busy. It was planned. It was hidden in plain sight. They went back to the tap with New Year. The counting wasn't random. It matched the interval between subway stop when trains were rerouted after midnight. The laughter wasn't a joy. It was relief. The sound that cut it short wasn't a door. It was a train coupling, metal on metal, a city shrugging. The fire escape made sense now. The open window. The wet metal. The routine that broke 3 blocks away because the train didn't stop where it usually did. They went back to the man and found him all day, quiet, carrying a version of the story that had calcified into a bee. They went back to the building and found the space where the box had been hidden, close enough to hear the radio through the ceiling, close enough to know when the counting would start. They went back to the headline and realized how the timeline had been bent by an assumption so small it had never been question, that the night unfolded in order. It hadn't. The city had moved piece while everyone watched the board. The case warmed, not with certainty, but with possibility. Names were revisited. Alibi retimed. The ledger's symbol cracked under pressure, revealing route and rendezvous point that turned the Lower East Side into a map of choice, not accident. Tuesday wasn't a day. It was a signal. By the time the new headline dared to use the word solved, the city had already decided how it felt about that word. Skeptical. Tired. Curious despite itself. The forgotten evidence didn't terrorize the past so much it retreaded it, pulling a single line through decades of noise and showing where it had always been to. Somewhere between a radio tuned to static and a suitcase that never arrived, the truth had waited, patient a rust. And still, in that hallway, if you stand there long enough, you can feel it, the pause mid-breath, the sense that the city is counting again, waiting for the right interval, daring you to keep up. The city keeps breathing even when the taps stop rolling, and somewhere between the clatter of the elevated tracks and the low hum of midnight traffic, the timeline began to warp, stretching under the weight of details no one wanted to see. The second night after the disappearance is colder than the first, not in temperature but in tone, because now the question has settled in, heavy and immovable. How does a person vanish without leaving behind a scream, a struggle, a single clean answer? Detective move through the apartment again, slower this time, if speed itself might destroy what little remain. The curtains still smell faintly of cigarette smoke. A Alfred paperback lies face down, its spin cracked at the center. The clock on the wall chess stopped at 11h42, and no one can agree whether that means anything at all, so meon photograph it anyway. In this city, even meaningless things are evidence until proven otherwise. Downstairs, neighbor got in small note, whispering theory that slide between sympathy and suspicion. Everyone remember something now. A raised voice in the hallway. Footstep on the stair after midnight. A carried line too long at the curb. Memory become elastic under pressure, stretching toward importance, snapping back into do. One woman swear she heard a door slam at exactly 11h45. Another insists it was earlier, closer to 11. The Times refuse to line up, and that refusal is the first crack in the official story, tug no one recognizes it yet. The case feel grottiker, but clarity does not. By the third day, the newspapers have a phrase for it. A cold case in the making. The headline cite heavy with implication, suggesting an ending before the story is truly begun. Police spokesman insist it's too early for that kind of language, but the word has already escaped into the streets, into diner and subway cars, into the pause between conversation. Cold case. Unanswered. Finished. The victim's name appear in bold type, paired with a grainy black and white photo that seem to flatten a life into a single, fragile expression. The city read, no, and keeps moving. Inside the process, the investigation fracture into parallel paths. One team retrace the last known hours, interviewing coworker, bar staff, anyone who might have seen a familiar face in an unfamiliar moment. Another team focus on the apartment itself, cataloging every object, every absence. A toothbrush missing from the holder. A coat not found in the closet. A set of keys gone, tug no one can remember seeing them before. Each missing item become a question mark pinned to the wall, fluttering slightly when Versomeon walks past. Then there is the call log, a page of number, times stamped in neat column, en orderly record that prétend can be tamed by ink. Most calls are mundan. Work. Family. Friends. But one entry stand out, not because of its length, but because of its timing. A short call placé just a minute before the estimated time of disappearance. Less than 30 seconds. The number lead nowhere at first, a dead end that feel deliberate, as if the city itself has closed ranks. Detective circle it anyway, sans seem waked where other see coincidence. Let night blur into early morning. Coffee grow bitter. Cigarette smoke curl towards the ceiling, carrying with it the unspoken fear that the tray is already cooling. Witness become less certain with each retelling. Alibi harden into rehearsed performance. The case begin to resist, pushing back against the and trying to shape it into something coherent. And then, almost an afterthought, a technicien mention the tap. It's an all surveillance system, installed more out of habit than necessity, its camera angled towards the street, the lobby, the alley behind the building. The footage has been sitting in a metal cabinet, unreviewed, because no one expected much from it. Grainy image. Bad angle. More frustration than revelation. But protocol demand a look, and protocol, in this case, become FATE. The tap is threaded into the machine, the screen flicker, and the past stutter into motion. The first hours show nothing. People coming and going. Shadow stretching across the pavement. A delivery truck double parked, a man arguing with a parking attendant. Time crawl. Then, near the edge of the frame, something shift. A figure pose beneath a streetlight, face obscured, posture unreadable. The time stand read 11h38. 4 minutes before the clock in the apartment stop. The figure look up, directly toward the building, if measuring it, if counting windows. The camera does not capture the eyes, but the effect is unsettling, like being watched by someone who knows you cannot see them clearly.
The footage continues. The figure moves out of frame. Seconds pass. Nothing else happens. No dramatic entrance, no visible struggle, no obvious crime. And yet, when the tape ends, the room feels smaller, the air thicker. Detectives exchange glances that say what words cannot. This is either nothing or it is everything. They rewind. They slow it down. They freeze frames until the image breaks into digital blocks. A jacket dark, possibly wool. A hat brim low. Shoes that reflect light for just a fraction of a second. Someone suggests the figure could be anyone. Someone else points out the timing again. 11:38. The number lodges itself in the case, refusing to leave. It becomes an anchor point, a moment around which theories begin to orbit. The next step is obvious and impossible. Identify the figure. The city, however, does not give up its ghosts easily. Streetlight records are incomplete. Traffic cameras malfunctioned that night. The alley camera caught nothing but darkness and a cat slipping past the lens. Every attempt to widen the view seems to narrow it instead, funneling attention back to that single, silent figure beneath the light. As days turn into weeks, pressure mounts. The family demands answers. The media demands progress. Police leadership demands results. Each demand pulls the investigation in a different direction, stretching resources thin. Tips flood in, most of them useless, some of them cruel. Sightings reported in other boroughs, other states, even other countries. A waitress swears she served someone matching the description. A bus driver claims to remember a familiar face in the rearview mirror. Each lead burns bright for a moment, then fades, leaving behind only smoke. Privately, doubts creep in. The estimated timeline, once treated as solid, begins to wobble. That clock on the wall. 11:42. What if it stopped earlier? What if it stopped later? What if it never stopped at all and someone merely assumed it had? Small uncertainties stack up, forming a quiet avalanche that threatens to bury the case under its own assumptions. But assumptions are stubborn things. Once written down, they take on the authority of fact. A detective with a reputation for patience returns to the tape again, alone this time after midnight when the building is quiet. He watches the figure under the streetlight, frame by frame, looking not for identity but for intent. The way the shoulders angle toward the entrance. The pause that feels less like hesitation and more like calculation. The subtle shift of weight from one foot to the other. He notes it all, scribbling observations that will never make it into an official report. Gut feelings have no place in paperwork, but they often guide the hand that holds the pen. Outside, winter deepens its grip. Snow piles against curbs, muffling sound, softening edges. The city looks clean, almost innocent, and that illusion is perhaps the cruelest part. Somewhere beneath the white, something dark remains buried. The case, now officially unsolved, begins to recede from the front pages. A new crime takes its place. Another name. Another photo. The rhythm of forgetting resumes. But forgetting is not the same as closure. In a filing cabinet, the tape waits, its plastic shell slowly degrading, its contents locked in a fragile loop of light and shadow. In a box marked with a case number, notes yellow edges curl, ink fades. The timeline, flawed or not, becomes canon, repeated so often it starts to feel true simply by repetition. 11:42. Last seen alive. No signs of forced entry. No witnesses. No suspects. Years later, when the phrase cold case is spoken again in connection with this file, it will sound almost clinical, stripped of the urgency that once defined it. But in this moment, as part 2 of the story bleeds quietly into the city's bloodstream, the mystery is still raw, still close enough to touch. A figure beneath a streetlight. A clock frozen in time. A call that lasted less than 30 seconds. And a sense, growing heavier by the day, that somewhere in the gaps between these details, the truth is hiding, patient, waiting for someone to notice that the timeline everyone trusts might already be lying. The tape does not begin with a scream. That is what disturbs the detectives most when they finally hear it decades later. No panic. No sudden rise in pitch. Just the low hum of a city at night and a man's voice, calm, almost bored, drifting in and out like static. It was recorded on a portable cassette machine recovered from an evidence locker marked in fading ink, misfiled under the wrong precinct code, untouched since 1979. When the play button is pressed, the past exhales. And with it, the timeline of the case begins to warp. In 1978, New York was loud, filthy, alive, and dangerous. The city did not sleep, it lurched. Subway brakes screamed like animals in pain. Sirens stitched the nights together. Garbage piled high on sidewalks, and nobody looked twice at shadows slumped in doorways. Disappearances were not rare. They were background noise. That is how the vanishing of Eleanor Raines first entered the system. One report, one carbon copy form, one more name in a city that swallowed people whole. Eleanor was 26. A copy editor at a small publishing house near Union Square. She walked the same route home every night, past the same shuttered storefronts, past the same bar with the flickering red sign. On November 14, 1978, she never made it back to her apartment. Her purse was later found under the F train platform at 2nd Avenue. Wallet inside. Cash untouched. Keys missing. No blood. No struggle. Just absence. The investigation followed the familiar arc of failure. Canvassing produced nothing. Witnesses contradicted each other. One man swore he saw her arguing with someone near the station entrance. Another claimed she boarded the train. A third said she walked east toward the river. Each version canceled the last. The city moved on. The file thickened with dead ends and then went quiet. But there was one anomaly. A line buried deep in the original incident report, written by a patrol officer who would retire 3 months later. Possible audio recording obtained from civilian. Logged separately. No follow-up. No inventory tag. No mention again. For 40 years that line meant nothing. Until a junior archivist, tasked with digitizing old cold cases, noticed a mismatch. A cassette listed under a 1979 burglary did not match the description. The label was wrong. The handwriting unfamiliar. The case number off by a single digit. When the tape was played, it was not the sound of breaking glass or shouted threats. It was a woman laughing softly, close to the microphone, followed by footsteps and the same male voice, low and controlled, saying, "Just keep walking. We're almost there." This is where the case changes shape. The voiceover on the tape does not narrate events. It captures fragments. Wind. Traffic. A subway rumble overhead. Eleanor's voice, unmistakable when compared to later recordings from her workplace holiday party, asks, "Why are you recording this?" The man responds without irritation. "So I remember," he says. "I forget things." That sentence fractures the original timeline. If Eleanor was recorded alive and calm after the time she was officially declared missing, then the last known sighting is wrong. The route is wrong. The assumptions are wrong. The entire case tilts sideways. Investigators begin reconstructing the night not as it was believed, but as it might have been. The tape's background noise becomes a map. A passing bus with a distinctive pneumatic hiss. A church bell striking 9 times. A train announcement, distorted but legible, naming a station that Eleanor was never supposed to be near. Each sound anchors the recording to a place and time. And that place is not 2nd Avenue. It is west. Closer to the Hudson. Closer to the old warehouses. In 1978, that area was a dead zone after dark. Abandoned piers. Crumbling buildings. Few witnesses. Perfect for someone who did not want to be seen. The man on the tape never raises his voice. He never threatens. He sounds like someone guiding a friend through a dark street. That is what makes it chilling. There is intimacy in the recording. Familiarity. At one point, Eleanor sighs and says his name. It is partially obscured by a passing truck, but the syllables linger. Detectives isolate it, filter it, replay it until it becomes a ghost of a name. It matches no suspect from the original file. The forgotten evidence forces a new question. Who was he and why was he recording? The answer does not come easily. The man's voice appears nowhere else in police archives. Fingerprints lifted from Eleanor's purse never matched anyone in the system. But the tape reveals something else. A habit. He clicks the recorder on and off repeatedly, as if checking that it is still running. At one point he mutters to himself, "Don't rush. Last time you rushed." It is not addressed to Eleanor. It is a private correction, a hint of prior experience. This is no random crime. The community reactions, reconstructed from yellowed newspaper clippings, feel distant now but were volcanic then. A young woman gone. No body. No answers. Her parents held press conferences that blurred into each other. Candlelight vigils flickered and died out. By the mid-1980s, Eleanor Raines became a footnote, a name mentioned only when someone spoke about how dangerous the city used to be. But the tape does not let the case stay buried. When modern investigators overlay the audio timeline with transit records, another discrepancy emerges. The F train Eleanor was believed to have taken was delayed that night by nearly 20 minutes due to a signal failure. If she had followed her routine, she would have been stranded on the platform with dozens of other commuters. Yet no one remembers her. No one saw her waiting. The tape suggests she never went underground at all. So why was her purse found there? That question opens a new avenue of suspicion. Staging. Misdirection. Someone wanted the investigation pointed east, not west. Someone familiar with police procedure, or at least with how easily assumptions become facts. The man on the tape seems unhurried. At one point, footsteps slow then stop. A door creaks open. The acoustics change. Eleanor says, "This isn't what you said." There is a pause long enough to stretch nerves thin. Then the man replies, "It never is." No anger. No apology. Just a statement. The recording ends abruptly. No climax. No resolution. Just a click and then silence. For decades, investigators believed Eleanor was taken quickly, violently, leaving no trace. The tape suggests something else entirely. A controlled interaction. A gradual removal from public space into private darkness. The timeline stretches. The window of opportunity widens. The suspect pool changes. Names once dismissed return to the board. A coworker who offered her rides home. A neighbor with a habit of recording conversations. A volunteer from a local audio collective who taught free classes on sound recording in 1977. Each lead carries new weight under the shadow of the tape. But the most unsettling realization comes last. The man did not record Eleanor to remember her. He recorded her to remember himself, to document his actions, to replay control. This was not a crime of impulse. It was a ritual. As Part 3 of the case file closes, one truth becomes unavoidable. The night Eleanor Raines disappeared did not unfold in minutes. It unfolded in stages across locations, under a clock that was never properly read. The city did not swallow her whole in one bite. Someone walked her through its veins calmly, deliberately, while a cassette tape rolled, preserving a secret that would sit in darkness for 40 years, waiting for someone to press play and realize that everything they thought they knew was wrong. The tape does not begin with a voice. It begins with a sound, thin, metallic, almost accidental, like a finger brushing a microphone. Then breathing. Close. Controlled. Whoever sat in that chair knew exactly how to breathe into silence without being heard. The room that captured it was never meant to last this long. A temporary interview space carved out of a municipal building already scheduled for renovation. Its walls thin, its wiring cheap, its records boxed and mislabeled. The cassette lay forgotten for decades because it was never logged as evidence, never tagged as relevant, never believed to matter. It was filed under routine intake, a bureaucratic graveyard where meaning goes to die. But now it spins again and the sound cuts through time, through dust, through certainty because it does not match the official clock. The breathing comes before the moment it is supposed to exist. The voice that follows speaks from the wrong hour. New York in 1978 measured truth by paperwork. Carbon copies. Handwritten timestamps. A signature in blue ink meant something happened. A missing signature meant it didn't. That logic had shaped the case from the beginning, narrowing what could be seen, what could be believed. The timeline was sacred. Every theory bent around it. Every suspect was cleared or condemned by where they were said to be at exact minutes that no one could fully verify. And yet this tape, this stray, unacknowledged fragment, speaks calmly about a location that had not yet been discovered, references a detail that the press would not print until days later, describes a sequence of events that, according to the file, had not occurred. The voice is male. Not young. Not old. Educated but not polished. The cadence is careful, as if each word is being weighed against consequences that will not arrive for years. The discovery of the tape does not happen in a dramatic raid or a midnight confession. It happens in a fluorescent-lit records room during a routine digitization project, the kind of administrative task no one remembers assigning. A junior archivist, headphones on, coffee gone cold, clicks play expecting nothing. What follows makes him pause, rewind, listen again. He checks the label. Wrong date. Wrong case number. He flags it, unsure why, driven by a sensation he can't explain. The sense that the room itself has shifted slightly, that something just slid into place that had been crooked for a very long time. When supervisors listen, the silence stretches. No one speaks at first. Then someone asks a question no one wants to answer. How did we miss this? The answer is not negligence. It is momentum. Once the original narrative locked in, everything else became noise. Witness statements that conflicted were chalked up to stress. Leads that pointed elsewhere were deprioritized. The city was busy, violent, loud. Another cold case fading into the background felt inevitable. But this tape does not fit the background. It sits in the foreground, demanding attention, and as investigators begin to trace its origin, the case fractures open. The interview was conducted off-book, an informal conversation meant to get a feel for someone who had volunteered information but was never considered central. The detective who recorded it died years ago. His notes are sparse, cryptic. One line stands out, underlined twice. Knows more than he should. As the tape is transcribed, details pile up like pressure. A mention of a stairwell no witness reported seeing. A reference to a smell, oil, and wet concrete that only exists in one specific building, a building not listed in the original canvas. The speaker does not describe violence, but he circles it, outlines its shape, implies timing with unsettling precision. He says, "By the time they notice, it's already wrong." He laughs once, briefly, not amused, more like relieved. The laugh is what unsettles people most. It does not sound like guilt. It sounds like someone acknowledging inevitability. The building he references still stands, altered but intact, its exterior renovated, its interior layered with decades of neglect and patchwork fixes. When investigators finally walk it again, they find the stairwell. Narrow, poorly lit, hidden behind what is now a maintenance closet. In 1978 it would have been accessible, a shortcut few people knew. The smell is still there. Old oil, dampness trapped in concrete. And suddenly the map redraws itself. The route changes. The timing shifts. The window everyone thought was impossible becomes not just possible, but obvious. The victim could have been moved without being seen. The witness who claimed to hear footsteps was dismissed because the timeline said it couldn't happen. But it could. It did. The ripple spreads outward, touching everything. A security guard's statement once deemed unreliable now aligns perfectly. A taxi log dismissed as erroneous now fits the revised hour. The alibi that held firm for decades starts to crumble, not because it was false, but because it was measured against the wrong clock. Someone was telling the truth in 1978, and no one believed them. Someone else was lying in a way that only worked if everyone trusted the paperwork. The city had trusted it. The case had trusted it. And now that trust is gone. Attention returns to the man on the tape. His name appears in the margins of the old file, misspelled, crossed out, followed by a note. Not a priority. He had no criminal record worth noting. No clear motive. He lived close enough to matter, far enough to avoid suspicion. He volunteered information early, then faded. When investigators track his history forward, they find nothing explosive. No arrests. No confessions. A quiet life, punctuated by moves that coincide eerily with moments when the case briefly resurfaced in the media. Each time the headlines flared, he relocated. Each time interest died down, he settled. Pattern or coincidence? In cold cases, those are often the same thing. What changes everything is not just what he says, but what he knows. Knowledge anchors guilt when time erodes everything else. On the tape, he mentions an object removed from the scene before it was catalogued, an item the public never knew about. He describes its weight, its placement. He uses the same phrase the responding officer would later write in his report, a phrase so specific it feels less like language and more like memory. The officer insists he never spoke to this man. The tape insists otherwise. As the revised timeline takes shape, resistance grows. Not everyone welcomes the idea that the case was built on a flawed foundation. Retired officials bristle. Old decisions are defended with surprising ferocity. The implication is clear. If the timeline was wrong, then conclusions were wrong, and responsibility spreads outward in uncomfortable ways. But evidence does not care about comfort. It accumulates. It stacks. It waits. The city outside barely notices. New York has buried too many stories to flinch at another exhumation. But within the investigation, the atmosphere tightens. Every discovery feels like standing too close to a ledge. The past is not distant anymore. It presses in, audible in the hiss of the tape, visible in the margins of old reports, present in the knowledge that the truth was always there, misfiled, misheard, misunderstood. The case is no longer cold. It is awake. And somewhere in a different part of the city, a man who once spoke carefully into a cheap microphone begins to realize that time is no longer on his side. The clock he relied on has been reset. The hours he hid behind have collapsed. The city that forgot him has remembered, and memory once stirred does not stop searching. The city had learned how to live with the unanswered questions. Years had passed, then decades, and New York moved the way it always did. Fast, loud, indifferent, while the case sat in filing cabinets, its folders yellowing, its photographs curling at the edges. Detectives retired. Witnesses died. Addresses changed. Buildings were torn down and rebuilt with glass and steel. And yet, beneath the noise, the case never truly disappeared. It lingered in precinct hallways, in late-night conversations, in the quiet way veterans would shake their heads when the file number was mentioned. 1978 was no longer a year people talked about, but its shadow remained long and cold, stretching across time. The victim's name still carried weight. It appeared in old headlines, clipped and scanned, floating on the internet like a ghost. A life interrupted. A body found. A timeline that never made sense. The official version had been accepted not because it was convincing, but because it was all that was left. A sequence of events repeated so often it hardened into fact, even as cracks ran through it. Those cracks were what drew a new set of eyes back to the case, not with urgency, but with a quiet, almost accidental curiosity. It began not with a confession or a dramatic breakthrough, but with a box. A cardboard box mislabeled and forgotten in a municipal storage facility in Queens. It had survived floods, budget cuts, relocations. No one remembered packing it. No one remembered unpacking it. Inside were cassette tapes, brittle notebooks, and a stack of Polaroids sealed in an evidence envelope stamped with a date that made people pause. 1978. The same week. The same precinct. The same case number. Written by hand in fading ink. The box was discovered during a routine digitization project. Old cases being scanned, archived, cleaned up for space. A civilian analyst, new to the job, noticed the discrepancy immediately. The official case file already existed in digital form. This box wasn't logged. It wasn't referenced. Shouldn't have been there. That alone was enough to raise an eyebrow. In New York, evidence doesn't usually vanish quietly. When it disappears, there's a reason. The tapes were first. Audio interviews, raw and unfiltered, recorded in cramped interrogation rooms with humming fluorescent lights. Voices cracked with fatigue. Chairs scraped against tile floors. Someone coughed. Someone swore under their breath. These were not the clean transcripts preserved in the official record. These were earlier. Messier. More honest. And as the tapes played, a problem emerged. The statements didn't match the timeline everyone thought they knew. A key witness, long considered unreliable, spoke with unsettling clarity on those tapes. He placed the victim at a location hours later than officially recorded. Not minutes. Hours. He described sounds, streetlights flickering on, traffic patterns that aligned with evening, not afternoon. At the time, his account had been dismissed as confusion. On paper it didn't fit. But listening to his voice decades later, the confidence was unmistakable. This wasn't guesswork. This was memory. Then there were the Polaroids. Crime scene photos never released to the public, different angles, different lighting. Shadows fell longer than they should have if the body had been discovered when authorities claimed. A watch on the victim's wrist showed a time that contradicted the coroner's report. It had been noted once in a margin, then crossed out. The official explanation followed quickly. The watch must have been broken. Except the photos showed no damage. The glass was intact. The hands frozen, yes, but not shattered. The notebooks added another layer of unease. Handwritten observations from an investigator whose name had been quietly removed from later versions of the case. His notes were blunt, skeptical, filled with underlines and exclamation points. He questioned the time of death. He questioned the route the victim was said to have taken. He questioned why certain witnesses were never re-interviewed. And then, abruptly, the notes stopped. Not concluded. Stopped. As if the pen had simply been set down and never picked up again. When these materials were reviewed together, a different story began to surface. One that didn't just challenge details, but threatened to overturn the entire sequence of events. If the victim had been alive later than believed, then the window of opportunity changed. Alibis once considered airtight suddenly developed gaps. People who were cleared early would have to be reconsidered. The timeline, the backbone of the case, began to bend. What made it more disturbing was how close the truth might have been. The forgotten evidence suggested investigators in 1978 were circling the right questions before being redirected. Resources shifted. Leads dried up. Attention moved elsewhere. New York had no shortage of crimes. This one became just another file. Its unresolved status filed under unfortunate but unavoidable. The community had felt it, though. They always had. The neighborhood where the victim was last seen never fully let go of the unease. Bars closed earlier. Parents warned their children longer than necessary. Even years later, people spoke of that winter with lowered voices. They remembered police cars lining the street, reporters shouting questions, the sense that something was wrong in a way that couldn't be explained. As the cold case unit pieced together the rediscovered materials, they noticed patterns. Names that appeared once and never again. Addresses that matched multiple witnesses. A vehicle description that was altered between reports. None of it proved guilt on its own, but together it formed a pressure point, a sense that the case had been shaped, intentionally or not, to fit a simpler narrative. The most haunting realization came when analysts reconstructed the night using the revised timeline. Streetlight records, transit schedules, weather reports. When aligned with the forgotten evidence, the city itself seemed to confirm the mistake. Snow had begun falling later than officially noted. Traffic cameras, long erased, had once captured congestion consistent with the witness's account. The city had kept the truth, even when people hadn't. Families were notified carefully. There were no promises, only possibilities. For them, time collapsed. The pain they had learned to live with surged back to the surface, raw and immediate. They listened to the tapes. They stared at the photos. They heard the doubt in voices they had once trusted. And with that came anger. Not just at the killer wherever they were, but at a system that might have missed its chance. Internally, the department faced an uncomfortable reckoning. Reopening the case meant admitting failure, not just of an investigation but of an era. Procedures had changed. Oversight had improved. But the past was still there, staring back from those Polaroids. The question was no longer whether the case could be solved. It was whether anyone was willing to follow the truth wherever it led. As momentum built, so did resistance. Records were incomplete. Some evidence was officially destroyed. Some witnesses were impossible to find. And some answers once lost to time would never return. Yet the revised timeline refused to be ignored. It demanded attention, reshaping interviews, reframing motives, narrowing focus in a way the original investigation never had. The city outside remained unaware. To most New Yorkers, 1978 was ancient history, a grainy montage of crime and grit. But inside a small group of offices, the past was alive again, speaking through static-filled tapes and fading ink. Each detail pulled the narrative further from what people thought they knew, closer to something darker, more deliberate. The case was no longer just unsolved. It was wrong. And that distinction mattered. Because wrong meant fixable. Wrong meant someone somewhere had walked free under the protection of an incorrect timeline. Wrong meant the truth had been waiting, patient and silent, for someone to listen. As Part 5 closes, the pieces are finally moving into place, not with the comfort of certainty, but with the weight of consequence. The forgotten evidence has rewritten the night, hour by hour, street by street. And in doing so, it has reopened a door that was never meant to stay shut. Behind it lies a city as it was, a mistake frozen in time, and a question that now refuses to fade. If the timeline was wrong, who benefited from the lie, and how long have they been hiding in plain sight? The city keeps moving, but the case does not. By the mid-1980s, New York has already shed one skin and grown another, and yet the file remains thick, yellowed, breathing dust when it's opened, refusing to lie flat on any desk. Detectives rotate out. Commanders retire. The names on the office doors change, but the questions stay exactly where they were left, frozen in a moment that refuses to thaw. Every few years someone lifts the lid again, drawn by instinct or obsession, and every time the same smell rises. Cold paper, old fear, and something unspoken that still feels dangerously alive. A junior investigator is assigned to audit dormant cases. It is a bureaucratic task, thankless, invisible. He is told to check boxes, confirm that nothing obvious was missed, close the loop if possible. He does not expect to feel watched as he reads. He does not expect the sense that the file is not finished with him. He notices the small things first. A timestamp written in a different pen. A property receipt logged hours later than everything else. A witness statement that ends mid-sentence, as if the person giving it simply stopped talking and no one thought to ask why. He reads the autopsy again. The language is clinical, restrained, but one line pulls at him. A note about stomach contents, digestion. A window that was never fully calculated. The estimated time of death was built on assumptions made under pressure. In heat, in noise. It is not wrong. It is just fragile. He checks the original lab slips, faded carbon copies. There is an entry initialed but never transcribed into the final report. A technician's shorthand. A correction that never made it upstairs. He turns to the evidence log. Most items are accounted for. Clothing. Personal effects. Fibers. But there is one bag sealed, resealed, marked with a date that does not match the day it was found. The discrepancy is small. A single digit. But it moves the item from night into morning, from before into after. From one narrative into another. He asks the property clerk. A man who has seen everything and trusts nothing. The clerk shrugs. Happens all the time. Labels get swapped. Dates get sloppy. You want perfection, you're in the wrong building. Still, the investigator pulls the bag. Inside is a cassette tape. Unmarked. No case number written on it. No description. Just magnetic ribbon wound tight, waiting. There is no record of it being played. No transcript. No memo explaining why it exists. It is, by definition, forgotten evidence. He finds an old tape player, plugs it in, presses play. At first there is nothing but hiss, the sound of air trapped in plastic for years. Then a voice emerges, distant, uneven. A woman. Breathing. Traffic in the background. She is speaking quickly, urgently, as if afraid of being overheard. She names a place. She names a time. She says she saw something she wasn't supposed to see, and she says it twice, because she knows how easily words can vanish if you don't anchor them. Then the tape ends. Abrupt. No goodbye. No follow-up. The investigator sits back, heart ticking faster than the clock on the wall. The date on the tape's leader strip does not match the official timeline. It places the witness alive, alert, mobile hours after the moment the case says everything was already over. If the tape is authentic, if it belongs where it seems to belong, then the story collapses inward. The victim was alive longer. Someone else was present later. The window widens. The alibi that held for years suddenly has air leaking through it. He brings it upstairs. The reaction is muted. Skepticism first. Old tapes lie. Memories degrade. Equipment distorts. No one wants to reopen a wound that has scarred over so completely, it has become part of the department's own history. But doubt has a way of spreading quietly, like a stain you only notice when it's too late to pretend it isn't there. They locate the woman's name buried in the file, misspelled, crossed out, flagged as unreliable. She moved. She changed her phone number. She stopped calling after no one called her back. They find her in a different borough, older, tired, surprised that anyone remembers. When they play the tape for her, she closes her eyes before the first sentence finishes. She says she thought it had been destroyed. She says she told them everything that night, everything she could. And when no one followed up, she learned the lesson the city teaches best. Stop talking. She repeats the story now slowly, carefully. The light, the sound, the way the street felt wrong, as if it had been emptied too quickly. She describes a figure moving where no one was supposed to be. She describes a vehicle idling when it should have been gone. The details line up with something else in the file, something written off as coincidence years ago. A patrol log, a radio call marked unfounded. They run the vehicle description again through databases that didn't exist the first time. A partial plate becomes a match. A name surfaces, connected to a man who was interviewed once and dismissed because his timeline fit too neatly to question. He had been cooperative, calm. He had receipts. He had witnesses. His story locked into the original time of death like a puzzle piece cut specifically to fit. Now the clock is different. They re-examine his alibi with the new window. One witness had left early. Another was mistaken about the date. A receipt was printed after midnight, not before. The margins shrink. The certainty dissolves. The man is older now. He has a family. A job that depends on his past remaining exactly where it is. When detectives knock on his door again, his face changes before he speaks. He recognizes the questions. He recognizes the shape of the trap even if he believes he already escaped it once. Interrogation rooms are smaller than memory makes them. The light hums. The tape rolls. He repeats his story, but repetition reveals stress fractures. Tiny adjustments. Pause where there wasn't one before. A detail added to cover the space left by a missing fact. When confronted with the cassette, he leans back, laughs once too loudly, and says he doesn't know who that woman is. When confronted with the corrected timeline, his eyes flick to the door. Outside the room, the detectives argue. Is this enough? Is it too late? Evidence ages. Juries doubt. Defense attorneys sharpen their knives on exactly this kind of delay. But the case has momentum now, and momentum does not ask permission. It moves because it has been waiting to move. They send items for testing that once would have been unthinkable. Fibers are reanalyzed. Biological traces, too small to matter in 1978, are suddenly loud with information. A profile emerges, incomplete but suggestive. It does not exclude the man in the room. It does not absolve him either. It sits there, an accusation without a voice. The media catches the scent. Headlines surface, cautious at first, then bolder. Forgotten evidence. New timeline. Cold case thawing. The community reacts with a mixture of hope and dread. Some want closure at any cost. Others fear what reopening the past will unearth. Not just about one crime, but about how many truths were buried with it. The woman from the tape is asked to testify. She hesitates. She remembers the silence after she spoke the first time. She remembers the way fear settled into her bones. But she also remembers the sound she heard that night. The one that still wakes her up. She agrees on one condition, that this time someone listens all the way to the end. As the case edges toward court, the pressure mounts. The defense challenges the tape's authenticity. The chain of custody. The date. Experts argue about degradation, about whether a sound is traffic or something else entirely. The prosecution counters with context, with corroboration, with the simple fact that the tape exists at all, an orphan truth that survived by accident. In the quiet moments, detectives sit with the file and feel the weight of years pressing down. They wonder how many cases like this are sleeping in drawers, waiting for a single misfiled item to wake them. They wonder what justice means when it arrives decades late, carrying apologies instead of certainty. The city outside has no patience for these questions. Sirens cut through the night. People hurry past the building without looking up. Somewhere, the original street has been repaved, the storefronts replaced, the shadows rearranged. But inside, time has folded back on itself, and the past is speaking again, not loudly, not clearly, but insistently, as if it knows this might be its last chance to be heard. The city does not forget quietly. It forgets the way a body sinks in dark water. Slowly, invisibly, until one day something surfaces and the entire river changes color. By the 7th year of the investigation, New York had learned how to live with the absence. The missing name no longer led the evening news. The photograph no longer hung in precinct hallways. The case file, thick with dust and redacted hope, sat in a metal cabinet that screamed when opened, as if protesting the disturbance. But absence has weight. and pressure builds where weight is ignored. It begins again not with a scream, not with a confession, but with paper. A box. Cardboard, water-stained, tied with twine that had long since lost its strength. It was discovered during a routine clearing of a municipal storage facility in Queens, a building slated for demolition, a forgotten annex once used by the Department of Transportation during the fiscal chaos of the late 70s. Inside the box were forms, transit maintenance logs, route deviation notices, handwritten annotations in blue ink, and at the bottom, folded twice, a thin carbon copy of a memo stamped with a date that should not have mattered, except it did. October 11, 1978. 3 days after the disappearance. The memo described an overnight closure of a service tunnel beneath a spur line near the East River. Temporary access granted. Limited oversight. No police detail assigned. It was signed by a junior supervisor whose name had never once appeared in the case file. The kind of man who clocked in, followed instructions, and vanished into retirement without leaving a mark. Until now. Detective Harold Brenner is the one who reads it first. Older. Slower. Still sharp enough to feel the jolt in his chest when the timeline shifts. The tunnel had never been searched. Not officially. It had been assumed inaccessible. Sealed. Flooded. Dangerous. But the memo says otherwise. Says open. Says overnight. Says personnel present. And suddenly the case is no longer static. It is misaligned. Bent. Rewritten by a piece of paper that survived 4 decades by accident. Brenner doesn't announce it. He doesn't call a meeting. He sits in his office with the door closed and rereads the memo until the words blur. October 11th. Access granted at 2200 hours. Work completed by 4 o'clock. No incident reported. He reaches for the original crime scene photos, spreads them across his desk, lines them up with transit maps yellowed at the edges. The location where the victim's belongings were found, the direction of foot traffic, the blind angles, the drainage grates. Everything points back toward the water. Everyone assumed the river swallowed the truth, but the tunnel runs parallel, hidden, silent, forgotten. When the task force is quietly reassembled, the mood is not hopeful. It is wary. Cold cases do not reopen cleanly. They resist. They punish arrogance. But this is different. This is not a theory. This is infrastructure. Concrete and steel. A place that existed, was accessible, and was ignored. The tunnel inspection begins at night. Always at night. The city above still roars unaware. Below, the air is wet and heavy, thick with rust and old oil. The walls are tagged with graffiti layered like sediment. Names written by people who never knew what lay beneath their feet. The flashlight beams cut narrow paths through the dark. Water drips steadily. Somewhere deeper, a rat moves, startled by the intrusion. They find nothing at first. Just debris. Old tools. Discarded gloves. A broken thermos. But then, 40 yards in, the ground changes. The concrete slopes subtly. There is a recess in the wall, shallow but deliberate. And inside it, pressed between a rusted pipe and the brick, something pale catches the light. Not bone. Not fabric. Paper. It is a transit pass. Issued in 1978. The serial number matches one listed in the missing person's wallet inventory. The one assumed lost to the river. The one that should not exist here. The tunnel goes silent. No one speaks. The past exhales. Forensics confirms it within hours. Fibers are recovered nearby. Synthetic. Consistent with the victim's coat. There are trace blood residues, degraded but present, embedded in a hairline crack in the wall. This was not a passage. It was a pause. A place where someone stopped. Where something happened. The timeline collapses inward. The night of the disappearance is no longer a straight line toward the river. It bends underground. The witness who claimed to hear a struggle near the water may have heard it echoing from below. The cab driver who swore the victim never reached the corner may have been right. The security guard who reported unusual movement near the transit access door is suddenly no longer mistaken. Just ignored. Brenner orders the old witness statements pulled. Names resurface. Voices from decades ago crackle back to life on tape. One stands out now, glaring in retrospect. A maintenance worker interviewed briefly and dismissed. He claimed he saw a woman arguing with a man near the service entrance. He described the man as wearing a city-issued jacket. Transit blue. Authority. Access. The statement was marked unreliable. The worker had a prior arrest. His credibility questioned. His name crossed out in red ink. He is found living upstate. Old. Sick. Surprised that anyone remembers him. When shown the transit pass recovered from the tunnel, he closes his eyes and nods slowly. Says he remembers thinking it was strange. Says he remembers the way the man stood too close. The way the woman kept looking past him, like she was trying to see help that wasn't there. He remembers the door closing, the sound echoing. He remembers telling his supervisor the next morning and being told to forget it. The supervisor is the same name on the memo. Records show the supervisor was questioned years later in an unrelated corruption probe. Bribes, favors, unauthorized access. He died in 1991. Heart attack. No charges. No confession. Just a pattern. And now a motive takes shape, ugly and familiar. Opportunity layered with silence. Authority abused. A system that trusted its own and buried what didn't fit. The press catches a scent of blood. Headlines shift. Forgotten tunnel reopens cold case. New evidence challenges 1978 disappearance. The family, long resigned to ambiguity, is dragged back into the spotlight. Old grief made new. They ask one question. Where was she taken? And the city has no answer yet. Excavation begins. Carefully, painfully. The tunnel is mapped inch by inch. Ground-penetrating radar reveals an anomaly behind a sealed section of brick near the recess. A void. Not natural. Deliberate. When the wall is opened, the smell tells the story before the sight does. Stale. Earthy. Wrong. The remains are incomplete. Fragmented by time and moisture. But they are there. Enough. Enough to end the lie that the river took her. Enough to say she did not vanish. She was placed. Hidden. Erased by design. The autopsy reveals trauma inconsistent with drowning. Blunt force. Defensive injuries. A fight that ended underground. A crime that relied on the assumption that no one would ever look beneath the surface. Brenner stands alone in the tunnel long after the others leave. He listens to the water drip. He thinks about the memo, the ink, the choices that redirected an investigation for 40 years. He thinks about how easily truth can be delayed. Not destroyed, just postponed. The case is no longer unsolved, but it is not finished. Names remain unspoken. Complicity lingers like damp in concrete. The city above continues, unaware that its timeline has shifted, that history has been edited by a forgotten piece of paper, and a tunnel that refused to stay buried. And somewhere between the rusted rails and the sealed doors, the past finally breathes again, not in relief but in accusation, asking how many other stories are still waiting underground, patient, silent, and watching. The box is small, almost insulting in its size, the kind of cardboard container that could be mistaken for office clutter, shoved aside, ignored, forgotten. It sits on a metal table under fluorescent light that hums like an insect trapped in glass. Inside it, folders yellowed by time, edges curled, paper soft as skin left too long in water. This is where the past has been waiting. Not buried in the ground. Not locked in a vault. Just misfiled. And as the lid is lifted, the cold case that haunted New York since 1978 exhales again, slow and poisonous, and the timeline everyone thought they understood begins to fracture. The discovery does not come with drama. No sirens. No shouting. Just a junior archivist, combing through records slated for digitization, noticing that a property receipt number does not match its contents. A small inconsistency. A clerical itch. The kind of detail that usually leads nowhere. But when the folder is opened, there is a Polaroid taped to the inside cover, its colors faded into sickly blues and browns. A woman's coat lies crumpled on a subway bench. Not the bench from the official crime scene. A different station. A different line. A different hour. In 1978, New York ran on noise. On chaos. On bodies pressed together in underground tunnels that smelled of oil and sweat and fear. The victim, Eleanor Weiss, 26 years old, a junior copy editor living on the Upper West Side, was reported missing on a Tuesday morning after she failed to show up for work. By Thursday, her body was found in Riverside Park, partially concealed behind overgrown brush, the Hudson breathing heavy just yards away. The official story solidified quickly. Abduction, assault, murder. Time of death estimated late Monday night. The city absorbed it like it absorbed everything else. Another headline. Another woman lost. But the coat in the photograph does not belong in that story. It was logged as evidence briefly, then reassigned, then forgotten. The date stamp on the back of the Polaroid reads Wednesday, not Monday. The station sign visible in the background says Canal Street. Eleanor Weiss was never supposed to be anywhere near Canal Street that week. According to the timeline, she was already dead. The old detectives had built their case around routine. Eleanor leaves work Monday evening. She is last seen entering the 72nd Street subway station. After that, darkness. The city swallows her. Witness statements placed a woman matching her description arguing with a man on the platform. A scream was reported. The rest was filled in by assumption. A familiar shape of violence. Pattern that made sense. It was easier that way. But now, in the present, the box opens wider. There are transit police memos marked non-relevant. A handwritten note about a disturbance call at Canal Street Station at 10:43 p.m. on Wednesday night. Female, distressed, refusing assistance, coat left behind. The responding officer wrote that she said she was waiting for someone, and then disappeared into the crowd. The name Eleanor Weiss is written in the margin, circled once, then crossed out. Why crossed out? The archivist flags it. A supervisor frowns. A retired detective is called. Then another. The room fills slowly with people who have lived long enough to recognize the taste of a mistake. The kind that lingers for decades. If Eleanor was alive on Wednesday night, the entire case collapses inward. The time of death is wrong. The location of abduction is wrong. The suspect pool explodes outward. Every alibi built on Monday night crumbles. Every theory that followed becomes a ghost. The medical examiner's report is pulled from storage. In 1978, technology was blunt. Time of death was an estimate, based on body temperature, rigor, insect activity. The report says between 36 and 48 hours prior to discovery. Flexible. Soft. Could stretch. Could break. If Eleanor died late Wednesday or early Thursday, the science would not have screamed in protest. It would have quietly allowed it. Then there is the phone log. Back then, phone records were paper. Towers did not ping. But Eleanor's apartment building kept a handwritten log of incoming calls routed through the front desk after midnight. One entry stands out. Wednesday night, 11:17 p.m. A call for Miss Weiss. Unanswered. The night doorman wrote, "Caller did not leave name." That call had never been mentioned in the case file summary. Sat there mute for 40 years. Investigators begin to trace backward, not forward. They look at who Eleanor knew, not who might have grabbed her in the dark. A coworker, Daniel Harper, had given a statement in 1978 that he last saw Eleanor Monday afternoon. He said she seemed distracted. He said she mentioned meeting someone later that week, but did not specify who. At the time it sounded irrelevant. Now it sounds like a doorway. Harper's alibi for Wednesday night had been ironclad. Dinner with friends in Queens. Multiple witnesses. No reason to doubt it. But if Eleanor was alive and moving through the city that night, if she was waiting for someone at Canal Street, Harper's alibi stops being the center of gravity. Someone else steps into the negative space. A name resurfaces. Quietly. Almost apologetically. Mark Feldman. Eleanor's former boyfriend. A graduate student in urban planning. They had broken up months earlier, according to friends. Feldman was questioned briefly in 1978, then dismissed. He had been out of town on Monday night. A conference in Boston. Train tickets confirmed it. Case closed on him. Or so everyone thought. But Feldman returned to New York on Wednesday afternoon. That detail had been logged but never connected to anything. Because it didn't matter. Not then. Not if Eleanor was already dead. Now it matters. Transit records show Feldman's MetroCard usage at Canal Street Station at 10:31 p.m. Wednesday night. Back then, the system was new, unreliable, often ignored as evidence. The swipe logs were considered too messy, too prone to error. But the timestamp aligns with the disturbance call. the abandoned coat, the woman waiting for someone. When Feldman is located decades later, living quietly in upstate New York, he laughs when contacted. A short, sharp sound. He says he thought this was over. He says everyone did. His voice cracks only once, when he is asked about Wednesday night in 1978. He says he doesn't remember. He says it was a long time ago. He says New York was confusing back then. The investigators do not accuse. Not yet. They listen. They compare. They notice that Feldman's story shifts subtly each time. Small details change. Where he went after getting off the train. Who he met. Whether he went straight home. Memory is a fragile thing. But lies have weight. They leave dents. Another piece surfaces from the box. A lab report. Fingernail scrapings from Eleanor's autopsy. Inconclusive in 1978. Stored. Forgotten. Modern DNA testing changes that. A partial profile emerges. Not enough to match in a database, but enough to exclude. It excludes the man once suspected on the platform at 72nd Street. It excludes the random theories. It does not exclude Mark Feldman. The city reacts slowly. This is not breaking news yet. Just whispers in precinct hallways. Retired cops shaking their heads. Journalists catching wind of something shifting underground. The idea that Eleanor Weiss walked through New York for 2 extra days, carrying fear, carrying secrets unsettles people. It means she was not just a victim of chance. It means there was intention, time, conversation, decisions made in shadow. The park where her body was found looks the same and not the same. Trees older. Paths repaved. Joggers passing without looking at the river. But now investigators stand there again. Imagining Wednesday night instead of Monday. Different weather. Different foot traffic. Different witnesses who were never asked because the question was wrong. The timeline is no longer a straight line. It is a knot. And as Part 8 closes, the realization settles like dust in the lungs. The city did not fail to find Eleanor Weiss in time. It failed to see her moving, breathing, choosing, for 48 hours that never officially existed. Somewhere in those missing days, the truth has been hiding, patient, waiting for a box to be opened under bad fluorescent light, waiting for someone to notice that a coat was left behind in the wrong place, on the wrong night, in a city that never stops moving but remembers everything eventually. The city no longer pretends to sleep. By the time the investigation reaches its 9th year, New York has learned how to live with unresolved ghosts. They sit quietly between headlines, wedged between subway delays and mayoral scandals, resurfacing only when someone stumbles over an old name or a box of files cracks open in a precinct basement. The case is no longer called urgent. It is called historical. Detectives rotate out. Witnesses age. Addresses dissolve into luxury condos. But the night it happened refuses to fade, and neither does the evidence that never quite fits, the kind that rattles when the room goes silent and reminds everyone that something fundamental was missed. The timeline, once thought solid, has begun to rot from the inside. A delivery receipt, dismissed decades earlier as irrelevant, is suddenly read again under fluorescent light. Time-stamped. Signed. 15 minutes later than it should have been. Not late enough to raise alarms in 1978, but late enough now to crack the spine of the official story. 15 minutes is a lifetime in a city that moves on signals and schedules. 15 minutes is the difference between a door still open and a lock already turned. Between a scream heard and a scream swallowed by traffic. Investigators trace those minutes backward, peeling the night apart like a crime scene reconstructed from memory and dust. A cab log near the address but never questioned. A bus driver who swore he saw nothing, now deceased, his route logs preserved on yellowing paper. A bartender who remembered a man standing alone, watching the door, nursing the same drink for almost an hour. At the time, no one thought to ask what he was waiting for. Now, his presence feels like punctuation. A period at the end of a sentence no one realized they were reading. The victim's last confirmed sighting shifts. Not by hours. Not even by half an hour. Just enough to matter. A woman across the street, interviewed once and forgotten, had mentioned a figure leaving the building later than reported, shoulders hunched, moving fast. Her statement never made it into the final report. It sat in a folder marked inconsistent. Decades later it reads differently. Not inconsistent. Inconvenient. Cold cases do not warm up gradually. They snap. One moment they are dormant, the next they are alive, breathing, demanding attention. When the timeline fractures, everything that rests on it trembles. Alibis once airtight begin to leak. A suspect ruled out because he was already gone at the time now floats back into frame. Another, once considered central, drifts toward the edge, his supposed opportunity shrinking with every recalculated minute. The community feels it before the press does. Old residents, still anchored to the block by habit or stubbornness, start talking again. Conversations that had been buried under decades of silence resurface at kitchen tables and corner stores. People remember things they had convinced themselves were unimportant. A noise, a smell, a door slamming too hard. Memory, unreliable but persistent, begins to rearrange itself around the new clock. There is a photograph, grainy and overexposed, taken by accident. A birthday party across the street. Balloons. Laughter. In the background, barely visible, a window lit when it should have been dark. The negative had been catalogued and boxed, never examined closely. In 1978, no one thought to zoom in. Now, digital enhancement pulls the background forward. A silhouette appears. Not clear enough to identify, but clear enough to confirm presence. Someone was there. Someone unseen. Detectives argue. Not loudly. Not anymore. These are tired voices seasoned by failure. But the arguments carry weight. If the window was lit, the victim was not alone. If the victim was not alone, the narrative collapses. The official version, printed and reprinted for years, suddenly looks thin. Too neat. Too eager to conclude. Evidence does not speak on its own. It waits for the right ears. A tape recording, once dismissed as static, is cleaned up with modern tools. Beneath the hiss, a sound emerges. Footsteps. Not one set. Two. Overlapping. One heavier, one lighter. The timing aligns with the newly revised minutes. The room grows quiet as the playback ends. No one says it, but everyone hears the same thing. The night was busier than anyone admitted. The suspect list, once static, reshuffles. A name scratched out in red ink decades ago returns, circled now underlined. He had motive. He had access. He had been cleared because the clock said he couldn't be there. The clock was wrong. He is older now, living under a different name in a different state. Time has softened his edges but not erased them. When contacted, he sounds surprised, then annoyed, then careful. He remembers the night. Of course he does. He remembers it too well. Another figure, long considered peripheral, gains gravity. A friend. A neighbor. Someone who knew the building's rhythms. Someone who knew which lights meant occupancy and which meant vacancy. Their statement, once accepted without scrutiny, now feels rehearsed. Lines delivered too smoothly. Details volunteered before being asked. In the light of the new timeline, their certainty looks staged. The press smells blood in the water. Headlines shift from remembrance to revelation. Forgotten evidence. New timeline. Cold case reopens. The city reacts with a mix of fascination and fatigue. Some cheer the possibility of truth. Others resent the reopening of wounds. Families who had learned to live with unanswered questions find themselves pulled back into interviews, statements, waiting rooms. Closure, once distant, now hovers just out of reach. Inside the evidence room, boxes are stacked like tombstones. Each holds a fragment of the night. Fibers, notes, photographs. Items once handled casually are now treated like relics. Gloves snap on. Labels are rewritten. A sense of urgency returns, unfamiliar and unwelcome. It reminds everyone how much time has been lost. A forensic detail, overlooked because technology couldn't read it then, finally speaks. Trace material under a fingernail, preserved by chance, yields a partial profile. Not enough for a direct hit. Enough to exclude someone who had hovered under suspicion for decades. Enough to implicate someone else. The circle tightens. The room feels smaller. Interviews resume. The questions are sharper now, less forgiving. Memory is challenged. Inconsistencies are pressed. Some witnesses crumble. Others retreat behind rehearsed confusion. One breaks. Not with a confession but with fear. He admits he lied about when he left. Not because he was guilty, he insists, but because he was afraid. Afraid of being pulled into something bigger than himself. Afraid of the police. Afraid of the truth. Fear is a constant companion in unsolved cases. It shapes behavior. It edits memory. It convinces ordinary people to make extraordinary mistakes. The revised timeline exposes those mistakes like scars under harsh light. As the pieces realign, a new sequence emerges. The victim is alive longer than reported. The encounter happens later. The window light makes sense. The footsteps overlap. The cab idles. The man at the bar finishes his drink and leaves. The night breathes again, no longer frozen in a flawed reconstruction. But clarity brings its own unease. If the original timeline was wrong, how many decisions were built on it? How many leads abandoned? How many suspects released? How many chances quietly erased? The case is no longer just about what happened in 1978. It is about what happened afterward. About institutional certainty. About the cost of closing a file too quickly. The city watches as investigators edge closer to something resembling truth. Not resolution. Not yet. Just alignment. The sense that the story is finally being told in the right order. That the night is being allowed to unfold as it did, not as it was convenient to remember. Outside, traffic hums. Neon reflects off wet pavement. The city moves forward, indifferent. But somewhere between the lit window and the overlapping footsteps, the past tightens its grip. The case is no longer asleep. It is awake, restless, and counting minutes. The box sat untouched for 43 years, pushed to the back of a municipal archive room that smelled of paper rot and disinfectant. A cardboard coffin labeled in fading ink with a case number no one said out loud anymore. A New York number from 1978 that had long ago lost its teeth. When the lid finally came off, it didn't creak, it didn't protest, it simply opened, as if it had been waiting, and inside were the scraps everyone assumed were already counted, already catalogued, already dead. Photographs with curled edges. Interview transcripts typed on uneven ribbons. Evidence tags yellow to the color of nicotine. And at the bottom, wrapped in wax paper, something no one remembered signing in. A strip of magnetic tape, narrow, brittle, marked only with a date that did not belong where it was supposed to belong. Not the night she vanished. Not the week after. A date that came before everything officially began. New York in the late 70s had taught people to live with noise, to live with danger, to live with unfinished stories. Sirens were background music. Missing persons posters blended into graffiti. When she disappeared, the city absorbed it the way it absorbed everything else, with a brief shudder and then a shrug. The official timeline was clean, almost too clean. Last seen at 9:20 p.m. Witness sighting at 9:45. Abandoned belongings discovered just after midnight. A straight line drawn through chaos. Neat enough to print in a report. Strong enough to stand for decades without anyone asking whether the ink had bled through. But timelines are fragile things. They rely on trust. On memory. On the assumption that what was written down at the right moment. The tape suggested otherwise. It carried a patrol radio frequency used briefly in the spring of 1978, phased out after complaints of interference. The voice on it was young, controlled, trying to sound calm while failing. Call log nowhere else. A location that, according to the official record, should have been empty at that hour. Her name spoken quietly, as if saying it too loudly might make something irreversible. When technicians digitized the tape, the room went silent. No one coughed. No one checked their phone. They listened to a city that no longer existed speaking from a slit in time. The dispatcher's voice. The officer's hesitation. A description that didn't match the final report. Clothing described differently. Direction of travel reversed. And the timestamp. God, the timestamp. 37 minutes earlier than the first acknowledged event in the case. 37 minutes that collapsed the spine of the narrative investigators had been leaning on for over 4 decades. Those minutes matter because everything hinged on them. The witness who claimed to see her near the subway entrance. The shop owner who heard shouting. The patrol car that said it passed the block twice and saw nothing. If she was already elsewhere, already in trouble, already not where everyone thought she was, then the entire city map drawn around her last night twisted out of shape. Streets became wrong. Alibis bent. Innocence and guilt slid closer together in uncomfortable ways. Old detectives were called. Retired ones. Men and women who had put the case behind them, who had told themselves there was nothing more to be done. They listened to the tape with faces that didn't move, eyes that flickered just once when the date was confirmed. One of them swore softly. Another asked for a chair. Someone said, "That's not possible." And no one answered because the sound was there, living and undeniable, vibrating through modern speakers with the weight of a ghost refusing to lie down. The forgotten evidence didn't just rewrite the timeline, it rewrote the hierarchy of truth. The earliest report was no longer the foundation, the first witness statement no longer the anchor. Instead, a mistake, an omission, or something darker had shifted the entire sequence forward, compressing events to fit a narrative that made sense on paper but not in reality. Investigators went back to addresses long since renovated, bars turned into laundromats, alleys now lit and surveilled. They traced the route suggested by the tape, not the report, and found something chilling in its precision. The path wasn't random. It curved. It avoided main roads. It ended near a service entrance that had been sealed in the early 80s after repeated complaints no one could now remember. People who had once been witnesses were now elderly, their memories fragile but strangely sharpened by the shock of being wrong for so long. One man admitted he'd given the time the officer suggested, not the time he remembered. A woman confessed she'd been unsure but didn't want to look foolish. A third said he'd seen someone with her, not alone, but the detail had been waved away because it complicated things. The new timeline didn't just allow these memories to exist, it demanded them. As the days passed, media picked up the story, not as a resolution but as a rupture. Cold case reopened, the headlines said, then sharpened their teeth. Forgotten evidence changes everything. The city reacted the way it always does, with fascination edged by dread. People who had never heard her name before felt like they should have. People who had walked those streets in 1978 felt something crawl up their spine as they realized how close they'd been to an unfinished truth. The most unsettling revelation came quietly. A cross-check of the new time window placed a person of interest somewhere he had never officially been. Not a suspect, not back then. Just a name buried in paperwork, a uniformed presence logged elsewhere by a system that trusted handwritten notes more than raw audio. He had died years ago. Natural causes. No confession. No reckoning. But his movements that night, when overlaid with the corrected timeline, formed a silhouette investigators could no longer ignore. They debated what to call it. Solved felt obscene. Closed felt dishonest. What they had was clarity, not justice. Understanding, not resolution. The evidence didn't point to a dramatic confrontation or a cinematic reveal. Pointed to a quiet failure. A moment when procedure slipped. When convenience overruled doubt. When a city desperate to keep moving forward let 37 minutes disappear. Families were notified. Words were chosen carefully. Apologies offered without quite knowing who they were for. The timeline was explained, redrawn, corrected. It didn't bring her back. It didn't even tell the whole story. But it told a truer one than the city had been living with since the summer of '78. At night, in that archive room, the box is no longer pushed to the back. It sits on a shelf at eye level, cataloged properly at last. The tape has been sealed in climate-controlled storage. Its digital copy backed up in places no flood or fire should reach. It is no longer forgotten. And yet the case remains what it has always been at its core. A reminder that mysteries don't always survive because of darkness. Sometimes they survive because of light applied too quickly, because of answers that arrive before the questions are finished being asked. New York has changed. The streets are louder now, brighter, watched. But if you stand in the right place at the right hour, you can still feel it. The thin place where the old timeline and the new one overlap. Where a woman's name echoes 37 minutes earlier than it was supposed to. Where the city holds its breath, not in hope of a solution, but in recognition of a truth that waited patiently for someone to finally listen.